First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Laura and also to Maddalena and Nanda Vardam for making this remote connection possible. And unfortunately, for bureaucratic stuff, I was unable to leave Paris in these days. So, I believe you have received a copy of the handout for my presentation of today, and I must stress that I do not intend to discuss in detail all the examples and the texts included there, and I will focus on few of them, which are also featured in my PowerPoint slides. And I have also added new texts with their own translations. So, to be clear, the texts in the PowerPoint presentation that are provided with their translations are precisely those that are not included in the handout. So, okay. So, the topic of my presentation of today concerns the conceptual association, words and arrows, which can be found in several Indo-European poetic traditions, and in particular, the starting point for my discussion is a highly interesting passage from the hadāraṇyakopaniṣad. So, but before entering into the core of the issue, it is useful to recall some fundamental aspects that have served as foundation for this research. And we can go to the, okay. So recent studies in Indo-European phraseology have basically made it possible to achieve different points, such as the identification of more or less standardized constructions and collocations, and the interpretation of compound nouns whose morphology and semantics was not really clear, and a deeper understanding of Indo-European society and culture. So for this reason, with this study, I will try to explore the roots of the words arrows conceptual association through the analysis of its occurrences in the different Indo-European traditions, namely the Greek and the Vedic and classical Sanskrit one. So we can, okay, so the starting point for this study is the first text, hadāraṇyakopaniṣad 3.8.2. Here, the sage Yajnavalkya, after having correctly answered several wise questions posed by various Brahmins, is once again questioned by the wise female sage Gargi Vajaknavi. So the young woman, despite having previously warned by Yajnavalkya himself not to go further into her query, steps forward once more. And before proceeding, I would like to emphasize that this contest of wisdom among Brahmins and takes place during the great sacrifice organized by King Janaka of Videha. So in the text, we can read, O Yajnavalkya, just like the son of a warrior of the Kashi of Videha, lineage rises to challenge a rival after having drawn the bowstring one released and holding in his hand 2 arrows that pierce rivals. In the very same way, I rise to challenge you with 2 questions. Give me the answer to them, ask, and then Yajnavalkya say, ask Gargi. Here we can see that Gargi is comparing herself to the son of a warrior of the Kashi or Videha lineage, and compares her 2 questions, Dvabhyam Prashinabhyam, to 2 arrows that pierce rivals, namely Dvau Banavantau Saptana Tivyadinau. If you go on, we can see another kind of association in the Rig Veda, which is obviously earlier than hadāraṇyakopaniṣad, where we can see that the formulation of or the hymns of the seer are compared to the straight flying arrows, Sadvir Ishavo. And here there is the idea that all these arrows, after being shot, achieve their final object. Then another really interesting passage is taken from the Shaunaka version of the Atharva Veda, where here we can see a complete and really detailed description of this kind of conceptual association. The tongue becomes a bowstring, Jia, the voice, the neck of an arrow, Kulmalam, the teeth are arrow shafts, Nadika, covered with ascetic fervor. With these, the Brahmana pierces the insulters of the gods, with bows that, impelled by the gods, strike through the heart. So, Rdbalair Danurbhir. That arrow, which the Brahmanas, armed with missiles, with sharp arrows, shot forth, is not shot in vain. Pursuing the enemy with ascetic fury and wrath, they shatter him even from afar. And then we have like a poisoned arrow, O Lord of men, like a viper or shepherd, terrible is the arrow of the Brahmana. Here we have the occurrence of the word issue, which is etymologically related to the Greek text, to the Greek lexeme ios, or issue in Avestan, and we have, and I've reported several kinds of formation like iocheira. Here there are two possible interpretations of the second member of the compound, and I do not want to enter in detail here. And however, we can see the occurrence of a word which we will see next in the passage taken by the Greek poetic tradition. So if we go further, another interesting passage is taken from the Mahabharata, where we can read, having heard this, Radha's son, such as Karna, his eyes wide open with anger, said to Bhishma, O Lord of Kings, striking him with words like whips, Grandfather, you hurt me with words like arrows, as you please, and the word interesting here is Vaksharair. So, if you go then to the, and I like to switch the Avestan part because I'm not so sure about the interpretation by Forte, and I need to think about it more deeply. Okay, so if we go to the ancient Greek texts, interesting to note are the following ones. First of all, Aeschylus, where the speaker is Pelasgos, and we can read, if the tongue has shot inappropriate arrows, glossa toxeusas metacairia, that surely provoke pains of the soul, algeinatum carta kineteria, one speech may be the healer of another. More interesting is the second one, such arrows taken from Sophocles, Antigone, and here the speaker is Teiresias, who is speaking to Creon, and he says, such arrows at the heart, since you are paying me, I, like an archer, have shot, with anger against you, unerring one's arrows, whose heat you will not outrun. And it's quite interesting for me to see how similar is this passage to the passage taken from the Brihadaranyaka we have read before. Then, before going deeper to this interesting theme, I like to stress that this kind of subject is deeply related and bound with the discussion about the formula epeapteroenta. That formula, present since Homer, has been interpreted in different ways by scholars. According to some, the expression is used to convey the speed of birds in flight, and others see in it a possible reference to the shooting of arrows. The problem here is that pteroes is an adjective that is never used in Homer applied to birds, but is found 4 times applied to arrows. I believe that a possible solution for this kind of image is that the fundamental starting point is the image of words, and thus the vocal expression, moving swiftly through the space from an origin, point A, to a point B. And the difference between the interpretations, so the interpretation of the flight of the birds and the interpretation of the arrows, finds its justification in the context within which the communicative process is imagined, in the semantic content of the words spoken, and in the ways in which such verbal message is conceived and conveyed. Interesting here is also the passage taken from Lucianus, the Heracles, where the Celts are saying that they represent the word in the shape of Heracles and not as Hermes. And here we have a clear description of words such as arrows. Kai tage bele autu oi logoi eisin, oimai, oxeis kai eustokoi kai takes, and other descriptive passages. So on this basis, I believe that it is possible to propose the following scenario, and we can go on. Okay, again. Okay, yeah, we have here, so we can have this possible scenario. So in the first step, we have the image of words moving swiftly and so characterized by speed through space from an origin point A to a point B. Then we have the need to express in terms the speed of the words, and here we can take into consideration the fact that in Indo-European, but not only in the Indo-European poetic traditions, birds and arrows, or generally weapons, are conceived normally as paradigms for speed. For example, here I've reported several passages which clearly show the fact that the birds are conceived as swift, and so here we have the passages from the Rig Veda, from Hesiod, and before in the Hittite, where we have the image of the birds swift. Then I've reported also in the next section, the 4th one, the speed of the arrows. So also the arrows and the weapons are conceived as paradigm of speed. And so for this reason, in order to express the swiftness of the words spoken, the conceptual association between words and boards and or weapons, namely arrows, can be created. So on the basis of their shared speed. So in Homer, for example, the formula epeapteroenta is already fixed, and so for me it is not so useful to analyze if there is the association between words and birds and words and arrows behind the use of this formula. In conclusion, I believe that the formation of the words and arrows conceptual association we have seen in the since the first text from hadāraṇyakopaniṣad, moreover, may have arisen in context of a verbal exchange between two or more interlocutors, particularly within ritual settings or wisdom poetic contests. So if the association between birds and arrows can only be based on the shared idea of swiftness, I believe that the conceptual association between words and arrows, besides the shared idea of swiftness, can be also be imagined as the result of these following points. So we know that answers to questions, when they are correct, can hit the mark just like precisely shot arrows. Then in the course of a verbal exchange, words, for example in Old Norse sennur, which are quarrels between men characterized by insults, so words can wound one of the interlocutors. And then in Indo-European culture, contests of wisdom, as well as the most archaic rituals, possibly, must have been perceived as genuine battles between two opposing parties, in which the loser could even risk their life. So for this reason, I believe that these 3 points and the shared idea of the swiftness of arrows and the swiftness of the spoken word can be considered as the starting point for the creation and the fixation of this conceptual association between weapons and words, and the fact that this kind of collocation is frequently attested in contests between poets is really significant. And I think that's all. Yeah, then I have put several compounds, but for the sake of time, I prefer to